A poor black village girl was forced to marry a poor man by her family. No one knew he's a billionaire. If this kind of story touches your heart, like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The rain hammered against the tin roof like 1,000 angry fists, each drop echoing through the cramped living room where Amara sat frozen on the edge of a wooden chair. Her mother's voice cut through the storm's fury, sharp and final as a judge's gavel. "You will marry him, Amara. Tomorrow." The words hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Amara's fingers gripped the chair's worn armrest, her knuckles pale against her dark skin. The scent of her mother's herbal tea mixed with the musty dampness seeping through their cracked walls, creating an atmosphere thick with desperation and broken dreams. "But Mama, I don't even know him." Amara's voice barely rose above the rain's relentless percussion. "I had plans. College. A scholarship. Plans." Her father's laugh was bitter as burnt coffee. He stood by their single window, his shoulders hunched like a man carrying the weight of the world. "Plans don't pay debts, child. Plans don't buy medicine. Plans don't keep creditors from taking our home." The silence that followed stretched taut as a wire about to snap. Amara felt the familiar sting of being the family disappointment, the black sheep who dared to dream beyond their circumstances. Her younger sister Kaya sat in the corner, her engagement ring catching the lamplight like captured stars, a reminder of everything Amara would never have. "David seems like a good man," her mother continued, her voice softer now, but no less determined. "Quiet. Respectful. He asked for nothing when your father approached him." "Because he has nothing to give," Amara whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. The slap of her father's palm against the table made everyone jump. "Enough. You think you're better than us? Better than him? You're 23, Amara. No decent family will want you now. This is your chance. Our chance." Outside, lightning split the sky, illuminating their modest home in stark relief. Peeling paint, mismatched furniture, the portrait of her grandmother watching from the mantel with eyes that had seen too much hardship. This was the world that had shaped her, the world she dreamed of escaping. "The wedding is at noon," her mother said, rising from her chair with the careful movements of someone whose bones ached with more than age. "Father Marcus has agreed to perform the ceremony. The neighbors will witness." Amara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of inevitability settle over her like a shroud. She had always been the stubborn one, the one who asked too many questions, who wanted too much. Now, at the moment when her life hung in the balance, her voice had abandoned her entirely. The next morning dawned gray and cheerless, as if the sky itself mourned her fate. Amara stood before her cracked mirror, adjusting the simple white dress her mother had sewn from fabric scraps. The reflection staring back at her looked like a stranger, hollow-eyed, resigned, already ghostly. "You look beautiful," Kaya whispered from the doorway, though her voice carried more pity than conviction. Amara turned to face her sister, seeing everything she herself would never be: delicate, compliant, blessed with the kind of gentle beauty that attracted worthy suitors. Kaya's engagement to Marcus, the son of the wealthy Okafor family, had been celebrated throughout their village. Gifts had poured in for weeks. Neighbors spoke of the match with pride and envy. "Tell me about him," Amara said, her voice steadier than she felt. "David, what do you know?" Kaya's eyes darted away. "Not much. He lives alone in the old Adelic house by the river. Works odd jobs. Keeps to himself mostly. And no family. No friends. None that anyone knows of. Some say he came from the north, but..." She shrugged helplessly. "Papa says he's honest. That matters more than wealth." The words felt like consolation prizes, small comforts for a life reduced to practical arrangements. Amara nodded and turned back to the mirror, watching herself disappear piece by piece. The ceremony took place in their tiny front yard, where folding chairs had been arranged in awkward rows. The scent of her mother's cooking, rice and stew prepared for the modest reception, drifted on the humid air, mixing with the perfume of the few flowers Kaya had managed to gather. Amara stood under their makeshift canopy, her hands trembling as she waited for her groom to arrive. The neighbors watched with expressions ranging from sympathy to curiosity to barely concealed pity. She heard their whispered conversations like background music to her nightmare. Poor girl. So much promise, wasted. At least someone wanted her. At her age. The man must be desperate. Or blind. Then he appeared, walking slowly down their dirt path, and Amara felt her breath catch. David was not what she had expected. Tall but not imposing, with calm eyes and careful movements. He wore a simple dark suit that looked well made despite its plainness, and his hands, she noticed his hands immediately, were clean and soft, not the rough, calloused hands of a laborer. He approached her with something that might have been a smile, though it never quite reached his eyes. When he took her hands for the ceremony, his touch was warm and gentle, surprising her with its steadiness. "Do you, Amara, take David to be your husband?" Father Marcus's voice seemed to come from very far away. She opened her mouth to speak and found only silence. The weight of everyone's gaze pressed down on her. Her father's warning look, her mother's pleading expression, Kaya's worried face. "I do," she whispered finally, the words falling like stones into still water. David's response came clearer, more confident. "I do." And when he said it, he was looking directly at her, not at the crowd or the priest, but at her. For just a moment, she felt seen in a way that unsettled her. The kiss was brief, ceremonial. The applause was polite. The entire affair felt surreal, like watching someone else's life unfold while her own remained suspended in disbelief. The reception passed in a blur of forced smiles and mechanical conversations. Neighbors offered congratulations that sounded more like condolences. The Okafor family, attending out of politeness, made no effort to hide their superiority. Mrs. Okafor's smile was knife-sharp when she embraced Amara. "Such a lovely ceremony, dear. So intimate." The pause before intimate carried the weight of judgment. Marcus and Kaya's wedding will be at the cathedral, of course, with the full service. Nearly 300 guests expected. The comparison stung exactly as intended. Amara nodded graciously, years of practice at being the lesser daughter, serving her well. How wonderful for them. As the afternoon wore on, she found herself stealing glances at her new husband. He spoke little, answering questions with polite brevity. When asked about his work, he simply said he managed various interests. When pressed about his family, his face closed like a door. "Everyone starts somewhere," he said quietly, and the conversation moved on. But Amara noticed things others missed. The way he held his fork, with an unconscious elegance. How he knew which wine to serve with which course, though they could only afford the cheapest bottles. The careful way he spoke, as if choosing each word deliberately. Most unsettling of all was how he looked at her. Not with the desperate gratitude she had expected from a poor man marrying above his station, but with something that resembled interest. Genuine interest, as if she were a book he wanted to read. As evening approached and guests began to leave, reality settled around her like fog. This stranger was now her husband. His life was now hers. Her dreams of university, of independence, of choosing her own path, all of it dissolved into the growing darkness. Her parents pulled her aside for final words of advice. Her mother pressed a small bag into her hands. "Herbs for cooking," she explained, though they both knew it was really a gesture of love disguised as practicality. "Be a good wife, Amara," her father said, his voice rough with emotion he rarely showed. "This man is your future now." She wanted to say so many things. That she forgave them. That she understood. That she was terrified. Instead, she simply nodded and let David guide her toward the old truck he had borrowed for the occasion. The house by the river was smaller than her family's, but cleaner. Sparse furniture, nothing decorative except a single painting of a sunrise over water. The silence felt different here, not empty, but full of unspoken things. "Are you hungry?" David asked, moving toward a kitchen that looked barely used. "I can make something simple." "I'm fine." The lie came easily. She was starving. For food, for understanding, for any glimpse of what her life had become. He nodded as if he had expected her answer. "There's a room upstairs. I cleaned it for you. Privacy. Until, whenever you're comfortable." The consideration surprised her. She had braced herself for demands, for immediate expectations. Instead, he was offering her space, time, choice. It made her more suspicious than grateful. "Why did you agree to this?" The question escaped before she could stop it. "The marriage. You could have found someone who actually wanted to marry you." He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft as rainfall. "Maybe I did." The words hung between them, impossible to interpret. Amara felt her cheeks flush with confusion and something else, something that felt dangerously like hope. That night, she lay in the small upstairs room, listening to the rivers whisper through her window. The bed was comfortable, more comfortable than her own had been. The sheets were clean and soft, not the rough cotton she was used to. Everything about this place spoke of modest care rather than poverty, though she couldn't quite understand the difference. Below, she could hear David moving quietly through the house, the soft sounds of someone who was accustomed to solitude. She wondered what he was thinking, whether he regretted his decision, whether he was as bewildered by their situation as she was. Sleep came fitfully, filled with dreams of crossroads and closed doors. The next few days fell into an unexpected rhythm. David left early each morning, returning before sunset with fresh groceries and supplies. He cooked simple meals that were somehow more flavorful than anything her family had managed. He asked about her preferences, her needs, her comfort, treating her opinions as if they mattered. Most confusing of all, he didn't seem poor. The realization crept up on her gradually. First, she noticed the groceries, not just rice and beans, but meat, fresh vegetables, spices she had only dreamed of. Then came the small improvements to the house. New curtains that appeared without fanfare, a radio that replaced their previous silence, books, actual books, lining a shelf she hadn't noticed before. "Where do you work?" she asked one evening as they shared dinner. The question had been building for days. "Different places. I help people solve problems." "What kind of problems?" His smile was enigmatic. "The kind that require patience." She wanted to press, but something in his manner warned her off. Instead, she found herself drawn into conversations that revealed more about her than about him. He asked about her dreams, her fears, the scholarship she had lost. He listened with complete attention, as if her words were precious things worthy of careful consideration. "You wanted to study literature," he said one evening, apropos of nothing. She nodded, surprised he remembered. "Poetry, specifically. I used to write." "Used to?" The question stung because it touched the heart of her grief. "What's the point now? I'm married. My life is here." "Marriage doesn't erase who you are, Amara. It should expand it." The words were so unexpected, so different from everything she had been taught, that she felt tears threaten. "You don't understand. Women like me don't get to choose. We survive. Women like you. Poor women. Black sheep. Disappointments." He was quiet for a long moment, studying her face with that unsettling intensity. "You're none of those things. You don't know me. Then tell me." And somehow she did. Over the following days, words poured out of her like water from a broken dam. She told him about feeling invisible in her own family, about watching Kaya receive all the love and attention she craved, about lying awake at night, composing poems she would never write down. She told him about her grandmother's stories, about dreams of traveling, about the bone-deep loneliness of being misunderstood. He listened to everything with the same careful attention, never interrupting, never judging. When she finished, he was quiet for so long she began to regret her honesty. "Thank you," he said finally, "for trusting me with that." It wasn't the response she had expected, and it left her more confused than ever about the man she had married. The first truly strange thing happened on a Thursday morning. Amara had walked to the market, as had become her routine, enjoying the small independence of choosing their meals. The vendor, Mrs. Adebayo, had always been kind but distant, polite transactions, nothing more. Today was different. "Mrs. David." The woman's face lit up with genuine warmth. "How wonderful to see you. Please, please, take these." She pressed a bag of the finest mangoes into Amara's hands. "A gift for your family." "I couldn't." "Nonsense. Your husband helped my son last week. Found him work at the port. Good work, with benefits. We are in your debt." Amara accepted the fruit with growing bewilderment. David had mentioned nothing about helping anyone's son, and she had no idea he even knew Mrs. Adebayo. The strangeness multiplied throughout the week. The pharmacist who had always been brusque with her family suddenly greeted her with deference, refusing payment for her mother's medication. Already settled, he insisted with a mysterious smile. The landlord who had been threatening eviction for months mysteriously dropped his demands, claiming the debt had been handled by a benefactor. Most shocking of all was her mother's recovery. The chronic pain that had plagued her for years began to subside, thanks to new medicine that had appeared without explanation. When Amara asked how they could afford such expensive treatment, her parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. A blessing, her mother said finally. We don't question blessings. But Amara was beginning to question everything. She confronted David that evening, armed with a list of impossibilities that had become her daily reality. What did you do? She demanded, following him into the kitchen where he was preparing their dinner with the same quiet competence that characterized everything he did. About what? My mother's medicine. Mrs. Adebayo's son. The landlord. Don't pretend you don't know. He continued chopping vegetables, his movements precise and unhurried. People help each other. It's what neighbors do. We're not neighbors with half these people. And even if we were, we don't have money to help anyone. You don't need money to help people, Amara. You need attention. You need to see what others need and find ways to provide it. That's not an answer. He set down his knife and turned to face her, and for a moment she saw something in his eyes, a flicker of something deeper than the calm surface he usually presented. Some questions are better left unasked. Not by me. I've spent my whole life accepting things I don't understand. I won't do it anymore. The silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken challenges. Finally, David nodded slowly. Fair enough. But some answers come with consequences. Are you prepared for that? The question sent a chill down her spine, but she lifted her chin defiantly. Try me. He smiled then, the first genuine smile she had seen from him, and it transformed his entire face. For a moment, she glimpsed someone else entirely, someone confident, even powerful. All right, he said quietly. But not tonight. Tonight, let's just be David and Amara, sharing dinner by the river. Tomorrow, if you still want answers, I'll give them to you. She wanted to press, to demand immediate satisfaction, but something in his tone warned her that she was approaching a line she might not be able to uncross. Instead, she found herself nodding, accepting his terms even as her mind raced with possibilities. They ate in companionable silence, the sound of the river providing a gentle soundtrack to her churning thoughts. She watched her husband, really watched him, noting details she had missed before. The expensive watch he wore so casually she had dismissed it as a convincing fake. The way he held his wine glass, swirling it expertly before tasting. The unconscious authority in his posture, as if he was accustomed to being obeyed. David, she said finally, who are you? He met her eyes across the table, and for a moment she saw him struggle with something internal. I'm your husband, he said simply. Everything else is just complications. But Amara was done with simple answers. That night, she lay awake planning. If David wouldn't tell her the truth, she would find it herself. She had noticed things, small inconsistencies that painted a picture she was only beginning to understand. The way he never worried about money despite having no visible source of income. The respect he commanded from people who should barely know him. The careful way he spoke, as if he was translating his thoughts from another language entirely. Most telling of all was his study, a small room off the main house that he kept locked. She had seen him enter it several times, usually late at night, always with a serious expression that suggested important business. What kind of business could a poor man conduct from a room in a house by the river? The next morning, David left earlier than usual, mentioning something about meetings in town. Amara watched him go from their bedroom window, noting the way he moved. Purposeful, confident, like a man with important places to be. She waited until his truck disappeared around the bend, then made her decision. The lock on his study door was newer than the rest of the house, solid and expensive. But Amara had grown up in a house where privacy was a luxury no one could afford. She had learned to pick locks as a child, opening her father's desk when she needed school supplies he had forgotten to buy. This lock was different, but not impossible. It took her 20 minutes of careful work before she heard the satisfying click of success. The door swung open to reveal a room that belonged in a different world entirely. 3 computer monitors glowed on a desk that looked like it cost more than her family's annual income. Shelves lined the walls, filled with books on finance, international law, and business strategy. A filing cabinet stood against one wall, its surface covered with documents bearing official seals and letterheads she recognized from newspaper business sections. But it was the wall of photographs that made her knees weak. David, but not David. The same face, but transformed by expensive suits and confident smiles. David shaking hands with government ministers. David cutting ribbons at building dedications. David seated at conference tables with men whose names she knew from television news. And in the center of it all, a family portrait that made her blood run cold. The Okechukwu family, one of the wealthiest dynasties in the country, their business empires spanning everything from telecommunications to oil to real estate. She had read about them in magazines, seen their charitable donations celebrated in newspapers, watched their youngest son interviewed on television about his Harvard education and bright future. The youngest son who looked exactly like her husband. Amara sank into his chair, her hands shaking as she reached for the folder marked "Personal" on his desk. Inside, she found documents that confirmed her worst fears and wildest dreams simultaneously. David Okechukwu, not just wealthy, but incomprehensibly, impossibly wealthy. Heir to a fortune that could buy and sell her entire village without making a dent in the family coffers. She found bank statements with numbers so large they looked like phone numbers. Investment portfolios that read like grocery lists of major corporations. Property deeds for buildings she recognized from her trips to the capital. And underneath it all, a letter that explained everything and nothing. Asterisk, I can't do this anymore. The performance, the expectations, the complete disconnection from anything real. I'm leaving. Don't look for me. I'll contact you when I'm ready to be your son again. D***. The letter was dated 6 months ago, addressed to someone called Father, in handwriting she now recognized as David's careful script. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. David hadn't been poor at all. He had been hiding, playing at poverty like a costume he could take off whenever he chose. And she had been what? An experiment? A way to prove something to himself about authentic connection? The sound of a truck in the driveway sent panic shooting through her nervous system. She quickly photographed several documents with her phone, returned everything to its place, and relocked the door. By the time David entered their house, she was in the kitchen, preparing lunch with hands that still trembled with anger and betrayal. "Good morning," he said, his voice carrying the same gentle warmth it always did. "How was your day?" She turned to face him, this stranger she had married, this billionaire who had played at being poor while she grieved for dreams she thought were lost forever. "Enlightening," she said quietly. Something in her tone made him go still. Their eyes met across the small kitchen, and she saw the moment he realized his secret was no longer safe. "Amara, don't." The word came out harder than she intended. "Just don't." The silence stretched between them like a chasm. She watched him make calculations behind his eyes, weighing options she couldn't guess at. "How much do you know?" he asked finally. "Everything. The money, the family, the lie." He nodded slowly, his face settling into an expression she had never seen before, resigned, but also oddly relieved. "I was going to tell you." "When?" "After you'd finished your little experiment in authentic living? After you'd proven whatever point you were trying to make." It wasn't an experiment. His voice carried a heat she had never heard before. "None of this was an experiment." "Then what was it, David? Or should I call you Mr. Okechukwu now?" The name hit him like a physical blow. He actually winced, his careful composure cracking for the first time since she had known him. "My name is David." That part was never a lie. But everything else was. "No." He stepped closer, and she saw something desperate creeping into his expression. "The important parts were real. Are real. Important parts." Her voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. "You let me believe we were equals. You let me think this marriage was some kind of noble sacrifice, that we were both making the best of a bad situation. Meanwhile, you were slumming it, playing house with the poor girl who didn't know any better. That's not, isn't it?" She was fully angry now, months of confusion and self-doubt crystallizing into pure rage. "You watch me worry about grocery money while you could buy the entire market. You let my family humiliate themselves with gratitude for tiny kindnesses that meant nothing to you. You made me feel small and grateful and lucky to have you, when the whole time you were the one who should have been grateful." The words hung in the air like accusations. David's face went through several expressions: guilt, frustration, and finally something that looked almost like panic. "You don't understand the situation I was in. Enlighten me." He was quiet for a long moment, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw. "Have you ever been so tired of people wanting things from you that you forget who you actually are underneath all their expectations? Have you ever been so surrounded by lies and performance that you start to lose track of what's real? The questions caught her off guard, their honesty cutting through her anger like a blade. I left my family because I couldn't breathe there anymore, he continued, the words coming faster now. Everyone I met wanted something. Money, connections, access. Every conversation was a transaction. Every smile was calculated. Every relationship was an investment portfolio. So you decided to try poverty on for size? I decided to try anonymity. I wanted to find out who I was when nobody knew what I could give them. I wanted to meet people who saw me instead of my bank account. And you found me. Yes. His voice was soft now, almost vulnerable. I found you. Despite her anger, despite her sense of betrayal, something in his tone made her pause. There was pain in his voice, real pain that resonated with her own experience of feeling misunderstood and undervalued. So what was I, David? Your social experiment? Your test case for authentic human connection? You were the first person in years who talked to me like I was just a man. The simplicity of the statement caught her completely off guard. She had expected more elaborate explanations, justifications, attempts at manipulation. Instead, he had given her something that sounded uncomfortably like truth. You still lied to me. Yes, I did. You let me believe we were both struggling. Yes. You made decisions about my life, about my family's life, without telling me the truth about what you could provide. Yes. His voice was barely audible now. I know how that looks. I know how it feels. And I'm sorry. The apology hung between them, simple and unadorned. Amara found herself studying his face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation. Instead, she saw exhaustion and regret, and something else she couldn't quite name. Why now? She asked finally. Why tell me now? Because you asked. Because you deserved the truth from the beginning, and I was too much of a coward to give it to you. And what happens now that I know? The question seemed to surprise him. He blinked, as if he hadn't thought that far ahead. That's up to you, he said finally. This changes everything, doesn't it? She wanted to say yes immediately. Of course it changed everything. How could it not? But as she looked at him, really looked at him, she found herself remembering the past weeks. The careful way he listened to her. The respect he showed for her opinions. The gentle patience with which he had approached their strange, arranged marriage. Had any of that been real? Or had it all been performance? The wealthy man playing at being humble? I don't know, she said honestly. I need time to think. He nodded, and she was surprised to see relief in his expression. Of course, whatever you need. But before she could respond, the sound of vehicles outside interrupted them. Multiple engines, heavy and expensive. Through their window, Amara saw a convoy of black SUVs pulling into their small driveway, completely out of place in the humble setting. David's face went white. They found me, he whispered, and for the first time since she had known him, she heard genuine fear in his voice. The vehicles disgorged their occupants like a military operation. Men in expensive suits moved with coordinated precision, surrounding their small house with the efficiency of people accustomed to taking control of situations. But it was the three people who approached their front door that made David's hands clench into fists. An older man with silver hair and cold eyes, his bearing radiating the kind of authority that came from decades of having his orders followed without question. A woman roughly the same age, elegantly dressed and beautiful in the way that required both genetics and expensive maintenance. And between them, a younger man who looked like a polished version of David, every line of his face familiar, but refined by privilege and confidence. Your family, Amara said quietly, understanding flooding through her. Yes. David's voice was barely audible. My father, my mother, my brother Marcus. The names hit her like ice water. Marcus Okechukwu. She had seen him in magazines, heard him interviewed on television. He was everything David appeared not to be. Polished, articulate, completely comfortable with wealth and power. The golden son of a golden family. What do they want? Me. The company. Control. His laugh was bitter. Same as always. The knock on their door was polite but firm. David stood frozen for a moment, and Amara realized with surprise that she felt protective of him. Despite her anger, despite her confusion about what was real between them, she didn't like the fear she saw in his eyes. Do you want me to answer it? She asked. He looked at her with surprise and something that might have been gratitude. No, I have to face them eventually. But when he opened the door, it wasn't David they looked at first. It was her. The examination was swift and brutal in its efficiency. 3 pairs of eyes swept over her simple dress, her modest appearance, her obvious lack of polish, and found her wanting. She saw their dismissal in the space of a heartbeat, felt herself catalogued and discarded as beneath their notice. David. His father's voice carried the kind of authority that expected immediate obedience. Enough of this foolishness. You're coming home. Father. David's voice was carefully neutral, but Amara could see the tension in his shoulders. Mother. Marcus. Oh, David. His mother's voice carried disappointment like a weapon. Look what you've done to yourself. Living like this, with. Her gaze flicked to Amara again, lingering just long enough to communicate complete dismissal. Well, we'll discuss your choices privately. Marcus stepped forward, his smile sharp as a blade. Little brother. Still playing games, I see. Though I have to admit, this one is more elaborate than usual. It's not a game, isn't it? The great David Okechukwu, slumming it in a shack by the river, playing house with. He gestured vaguely toward Amara. What do we call this exactly? A social experiment? Research for your next charitable tax write-off. The casual cruelty of the comment made Amara's breath catch. She had experienced dismissal before, had grown up feeling less important than others, but never had she felt so thoroughly reduced to nothing as she did under these people's gazes. Her name is Amara, David said quietly, but with steel underneath. She's my wife. The silence that followed was deafening. Amara watched 3 faces process this information with varying degrees of shock, disgust, and calculation. His mother recovered first. Your wife. The words sounded like she was testing their flavor and finding them bitter. How quaint. David. His father's voice was dangerously quiet. Step outside. Now. No. The single word dropped into the silence like a stone into still water. Amara saw the shock ripple across their faces. Clearly, David didn't say no to his father very often. I beg your pardon. I said no. If you have something to say to me, you can say it here. In front of my wife. Wife. He kept using that word like it meant something, like it carried weight and importance. Despite everything, Amara felt something warm unfurl in her chest. His father's face darkened. Very well. You've had your little adventure, your rebellion, your whatever this is. It's over. The board is asking questions about your absence. The press is starting to notice. Your behavior is affecting the company's stock price. And you will return home immediately. You will resume your responsibilities. And you will end this situation. His gaze flicked to Amara again, making it clear exactly what situation he meant. No. Another shock wave of silence. Marcus stepped forward, his expression shifting from amusement to something harder. David, be reasonable. You can't actually mean to stay here. Look around you. He gestured at their modest home with undisguised disdain. Look at her. She's not even educated, is she? Probably can't even read properly. The insult hit its mark perfectly, striking at every insecurity Amara had ever carried. She felt her cheeks burn with shame and anger, the old familiar feeling of being found lacking, of not measuring up to people who mattered. But then David did something that surprised everyone in the room. He laughed, not a bitter laugh or a nervous laugh, but a sound of genuine amusement that carried an edge of something dangerous. You want to know about education, Marcus? Amara speaks 4 languages fluently. She reads philosophy for pleasure. She writes poetry that would make your expensive private tutors weep with envy. She understands human nature better than any psychology course you've ever taken. He turned to face his family fully, and Amara saw the man she had glimpsed in photographs. Confident, commanding, powerful. But more than that, he continued, she sees people. Real people, not portfolios or opportunities or networking contacts. She saw me as just a man when I needed to be seen as just a man. She talked to me about dreams and fears and hopes instead of quarterly projections and market positioning. How touching, his mother said dryly. But hardly the foundation for a serious relationship. David, you're 28 years old. It's time to put aside childish romanticism and accept your responsibilities. My responsibilities to whom? To the family, to the company, to the legacy your grandfather built. The same legacy that's turned all of you into people who can't see past bank statements and social status. The same company that's made you so comfortable with cruelty that you can stand in someone's home and insult their wife to their face. The words hit like physical blows. Amara watched his family recoil as if David had struck them, their composed facades cracking to reveal genuine shock. David. His father's voice carried warning now. You're out of line. Am I? Or am I finally seeing the line clearly for the first time? Marcus stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. You think you can just walk away from everything? Abandon your responsibilities, your family, your name? For what? Some misguided fantasy about authentic living. For the chance to be a man instead of a brand. For the possibility of love instead of strategic marriage. For relationships based on who I am instead of what I can provide. And what exactly do you think you are without the family name? Marcus's voice dripped with contempt. Without the money, the connections, the power? You're nothing, David. Just another mediocre man with delusions of significance. The words hung in the air like poison, designed to wound in the deepest possible way. Amara watched David's face, expecting to see him crumble under the assault. Instead, she saw something else entirely, a calm certainty that surprised even her. You're right, he said quietly. Without all of that, I'm just a man. But that's exactly what I wanted to be. His mother made a sound of frustration. This is ridiculous. You've made your point, whatever it was. You've had your rebellion. Now it's time to come home and face reality. This is my reality now. David's voice carried absolute conviction. My wife, my home, my life. I'm not coming back. Your wife. His father spat the words like they tasted bitter. You married a stranger to make some kind of statement? How pathetically juvenile. I married her because she's the first person I've met in years who made me want to be better than I am. The simple honesty of the statement hit Amara like a physical force. Despite her anger, despite her confusion about what was real between them, she felt something shift inside her chest. He was choosing her. Publicly, definitively, in front of people whose approval had shaped his entire life. He was choosing her. But his family wasn't finished. Fine, his father said, his voice turning ice cold. If this is your choice, then live with the consequences. As of this moment, you are disinherited. No money, no properties, no company shares. Nothing. Let's see how long your authentic love lasts when you're actually poor. The threat landed with the weight of an avalanche. Amara felt her breath catch, understanding for the first time the true scale of what David was giving up. Not just wealth, but generational wealth. Not just comfort, but the kind of security that bought freedom from every ordinary worry. Additionally, his mother added with surgical precision, we'll be making it clear to our business partners that anyone who employs you will find themselves excluded from future opportunities. Good luck finding work that matches your education, darling. Marcus smiled with genuine pleasure at his parents' cruelty. And of course, we'll need to discuss this situation with the press. I'm sure they'll be fascinated by the story of the Okechukwu heir who threw away a fortune for a village girl. The human interest angle alone should generate weeks of coverage. The threat was clear. They would destroy not just David's financial future, but his reputation and privacy as well. They would make him an object of public ridicule, a cautionary tale about the folly of following one's heart. Amara watched David's face throughout this systematic dismantling of his life, waiting for him to break, to reconsider, to choose the sensible path back to his family's embrace. Instead, he nodded calmly. All right, he said, do what you feel you need to do. The simple acceptance seemed to deflate his family's satisfaction. They had expected him to beg, to negotiate, to recognize the impossibility of his position. His quiet agreement left them momentarily speechless. David, his mother tried one more time, her voice softer now, almost pleading. Think about what you're doing. Really think. Is this woman worth destroying your entire future? Before David could answer, something inside Amara finally snapped. Stop. The word came out harder and louder than she intended, cutting through the tension like a blade. For pairs of eyes turned to her, and she felt the familiar flutter of panic at being the center of attention. But this time, she pushed through it. Just stop. She looked directly at David's mother, meeting those cold, judgmental eyes without flinching. You want to know if I'm worth it? You want to know what kind of person your son chose over everything you could give him? She stepped forward, feeling David's surprised gaze on her profile. I'm the daughter of a subsistence farmer and a seamstress. I've never owned a dress that cost more than $20. I learned to read by candlelight because we couldn't afford proper lamps. I've eaten rice and beans for dinner more nights than I can count. Marcus started to speak, but she held up a hand to stop him. But I've also read Chinua Achebe and Maya Angelou and Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie until their words became part of my blood. I can write in English and Igbo and French and enough Arabic to get by. I know the difference between genuine kindness and calculated charm because I've lived without either for long enough to recognize them when they appear. Her voice was growing stronger, carrying the weight of 23 years of being underestimated and dismissed. You look at me and see poverty, lack of education, social inadequacy. But your son looked at me and saw someone worth talking to, someone worth listening to, someone worth choosing. She turned to David then and saw something in his expression that took her breath away: pride. Not embarrassment or concern about what his family thought, but genuine pride in her strength. The question isn't whether I'm worth destroying his future for, she continued, looking back at his family. The question is whether the future you're offering him is worth having in the first place. The silence that followed was absolute. Amara could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of everyone's attention, but for the first time in her life, she didn't shrink from it. His father was the first to recover. How dare you? No. David's voice cut through the beginning of his father's outrage. She's right. The future you're threatening to take away, the money, the status, the approval of people who measure worth in bank statements? I don't want it anymore. He moved to stand beside Amara, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. I spent 28 years trying to be the son you wanted, the heir you needed, the public face you could be proud of. And I was miserable every single day of it. His voice carried a pain so raw it made Amara's chest ache. Do you know what it's like to wake up every morning knowing that everyone who smiles at you, who laughs at your jokes, who claims to care about you, is really just investing in access to your bank account? Do you know what it's like to never be sure if anything in your life is real or just another transaction? His mother's composed facade was beginning to crack. David, we love you. Do you? Or do you love the idea of me? The heir, the investment, the continuation of your legacy? Because the moment I became someone different, someone who wanted different things, you came here to destroy my life rather than try to understand it. The accusation hit its mark. Amara watched his parents exchange glances, their certainty wavering for the first time. But Marcus wasn't ready to give up. Fine. You want to play poor? Let's see how it goes. 6 months from now, when you're struggling to pay rent and she's tired of poverty, remember this conversation. Remember that you chose pride over family. I chose love over fear, David replied quietly. And if that turns out to be a mistake, at least it will be my mistake to make. The finality in his voice seemed to break through his family's remaining resistance. His father straightened his shoulders, his face settling into the cold mask of a man who had been personally insulted. So be it. You are no longer my son. You are no longer part of this family. You will receive nothing from us, now or ever. The words were meant to be a death sentence, a final punishment that would force David to reconsider. Instead, they seemed to free something inside him. Amara watched his posture straighten, his expression clear, as if a weight he had been carrying for years had finally been lifted. Thank you, he said simply, for making the choice so clear. His mother made one last attempt. David, please, don't let pride destroy. It's not pride, mother. It's hope. For the first time in my life, I have hope that tomorrow will be different from today, better than yesterday. That's worth more than all the money in the world. The conversation was over. His family seemed to recognize it simultaneously, their faces settling into expressions of cold finality. They had come to reclaim their prodigal son and instead had lost him completely. As they turned to leave, Marcus paused in the doorway. When this fantasy falls apart, he said, his voice carrying casual cruelty, don't come crawling back. You've made your bed with the servant girl. Sleep in it. The door closed behind them with the sound of finality. Through the window, Amara watched the convoy of expensive vehicles disappear down their dirt road, taking with them everything David had been born to inherit. The silence that followed felt different from any they had shared before, heavy with the weight of choices made and bridges burned. Are you all right? Amara asked finally, the words feeling inadequate for the magnitude of what had just occurred. David was staring at the closed door, his face unreadable. When he turned to her, she saw something she hadn't expected: relief, pure and simple. I think I am, he said, sounding surprised. For the first time in years, I think I actually am. But Amara felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like lead. David, what have you done? The money, your family, your entire future. You've given up everything. Have I? He moved closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. Or have I finally figured out what's actually worth keeping? The intensity of his gaze made her breath catch. You don't understand what you've chosen. A life of struggle, of uncertainty, of reality, of authentic connection, of love that doesn't come with quarterly performance reviews. He reached out slowly, giving her time to step away if she wanted. When she didn't, his hands found hers. Amara, do you know what the worst part of my old life was? She shook her head, afraid to trust her voice. Never knowing if anything was real. Never being sure if people cared about me or just what I could do for them. Never being certain that love wasn't just another form of transaction. His thumbs traced gentle circles on the backs of her hands. But with you, even when you're angry at me, even when you're questioning everything about our situation, I know it's real. Your feelings, your reactions, your honesty, all of it is completely, authentically real. But you lied to me, she whispered, the old hurt rising again. How can you talk about authenticity when our entire relationship is built on deception? He was quiet for a long moment, his hand still holding hers. You're right, he said finally. I did lie to you. About the money, about my background, about the circumstances that brought me here. But I never lied about the important things. What important things? That I think you're extraordinary. That talking to you is the best part of my day. That you make me want to be a better man than I've ever been. That somewhere along the way, I fell completely in love with you. The words hit her like a physical force, unexpected and overwhelming. She stared at him, searching his face for signs of manipulation or calculation, finding only sincerity so raw it made her chest ache. You love me, she repeated, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. Yes, completely, irrevocably, in a way that has nothing to do with convenience or arrangement or social expectation. He smiled, and for the first time since she'd known him, it was completely unguarded. I love your intelligence, your strength, your refusal to accept easy answers. I love the way you make me think about things differently. I love that you see through pretense straight to the heart of things. Tears she hadn't expected began to blur her vision. But I'm not. I'm not what people like you choose. I'm not educated enough, or sophisticated enough, or you're everything people like me need. He interrupted gently. You're real, Amara. In a world full of performance and pretense, you're completely, utterly real. She wanted to believe him. Standing there in their modest kitchen, her hands in his, listening to him choose her over everything he had been born to inherit. She wanted to believe that love could really be that simple, that powerful, that transformative. But doubt, her old companion, whispered its familiar warnings. What happens now? She asked. Your family meant what they said. You're cut off, blacklisted. How do we live? How do we survive? David's smile widened, and she caught a glimpse of something she had never seen before. Excitement, pure and unfiltered. We figure it out together. We work, we build something new. We create a life that belongs to us instead of inheriting one that never felt real. You don't understand what poverty actually means, she said, fear making her voice sharp. It's not romantic. It's not character building. It's exhausting and frightening, and then teach me. His voice was quiet but steady. Show me what I need to know. Help me become someone worthy of the life you're offering. The words caught her completely off guard. In all her fears about their future, she had never considered that he might see her as the teacher, the one with valuable knowledge to share. You really mean it, she said, studying his face. You're really choosing this. Choosing us. I'm choosing you, he corrected. Everything else is just details we'll work out as we go. The simplicity of it took her breath away. After years of feeling like the consolation prize, the backup plan, the one chosen only when better options weren't available. Here was a man who had given up everything to choose her first. I'm still angry, she said, the words coming out softer than she intended. About the lying, about the deception. It's going to take time for me to trust that this is real. I know, and I'll earn that trust, however long it takes. And I'm scared. About money, about the future, about whether love is really enough to build a life on. I'm scared too. but I'd rather be scared with you than safe and miserable without you. The honesty of it broke through the last of her defenses. She looked at this man, her husband, her choice, her future, and saw not the wealthy heir or the deceptive stranger, but simply David. Flawed, frightened, but completely committed to the impossible thing they were trying to build together. Okay, she whispered. Okay, let's try. Let's see if love really is enough to build a life on. His smile was like sunrise after the longest night. He pulled her closer, close enough that she could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong and real. We'll figure it out together, he promised against her hair. All of it. The work, the money, the future. We'll build something that belongs to us. And as she stood there in their modest kitchen, held by a man who had chosen her over everything else in the world, Amara felt something she had never experienced before, the absolute certainty that she was loved, not for what she could provide or how she compared to others, but simply for who she was. It wasn't the ending she had imagined when this strange journey began. It wasn't the fairy tale rescue or the dramatic transformation she might have dreamed of. Instead, it was something rarer and more precious, the beginning of a love story built on choice rather than circumstance, on seeing and being seen rather than convenience or arrangement. The future stretched ahead of them, uncertain and challenging and full of obstacles they couldn't yet imagine. But they would face it together, the billionaire who had given up everything and the black sheep who had finally found someone who valued her exactly as she was. And in that moment, surrounded by the simple reality of their small home by the river, it felt like more than enough. It felt like everything. Outside, the sun was setting over the water, painting their modest world in shades of gold and possibility. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new questions about how to build a life from nothing but love and determination. But tonight, they had each other, and the quiet certainty that sometimes the most valuable things in life are the ones you choose rather than the ones you inherit. David, Amara said softly, pulling back to look at his face. Yes. Next time you want to tell me something important, just tell me. No more secrets, no more protection. If we're doing this together, we do all of it together. He nodded solemnly. No more secrets. I promise. Good. Because there's something I need to tell you too. His eyebrows rose in surprise. What? She smiled, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. I think I'm falling in love with you too. The real you. Not the poor man I thought I married, and not the wealthy heir I discovered today. Just you. The kiss that followed was different from their ceremonial wedding kiss, different from anything that had come before. It was a promise, a choice, a beginning. It tasted like truth and possibility and the brave decision to build something beautiful from the raw materials of honesty and hope. When they finally broke apart, David rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed as if he was memorizing the moment. So what now? Amara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Now, he said, opening his eyes to meet hers. We figure out how to be extraordinary together. And as the last light faded over their small home by the river, they began to do exactly that. Two people who had found each other across the vast distances of class and expectation and fear, choosing love over safety, truth over comfort, and the uncertain beauty of an authentic life over the hollow security of inherited privilege. The black sheep had finally found her place, not as the lesser daughter or the consolation prize, but as the chosen one, chosen not by circumstance or arrangement, but by a man who had seen her true worth and decided it was worth more than all the money in the world. And for the first time in her life, Amara believed him completely. If you made it to the end, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. It truly means the world to us. See you in the next one.